The sun was already beginning to set when Lívia arrived at the small coastal town. Seeking the inspiration she seemed to have lost amid the hustle of urban life. The salty breeze and the gentle sound of waves crashing on the rocks embraced her like a warm and familiar hug. It was the perfect refuge for someone in need of rediscovering their own words. The narrow streets, lined with old mansions and blooming balconies, looked like they came straight out of a romance novel. Everything there had a nostalgic air, as if time had stood still. Wandering aimlessly, Lívia observed every detail, the faded colors of the facades, fishermen hauling in their nets, and the few tourists who seemed just as enchanted as she was. On one of these streets, a small shop with a discreet facade caught her attention. An antique store, almost hidden between larger buildings. The chipped wooden sign announced a name that was barely legible, but what drew her in were the objects on the other side of the misty glass. Inside, dusty books, old clocks, and black and white photographs told stories seemingly lost in time. Upon entering, Lívia felt the distinctive smell of aged paper mixed with old wood. Every corner of the shop seemed filled with secrets waiting to be discovered. As she turned toward a bookshelf, her eyes met those of Miguel. He stood behind the counter, observing her with a curious gaze. A young man with serene features, his appearance carried an air that suggested he bore much more than he showed. He wore clothes that seemed outdated but had an almost cinematic charm on him. "May I help you?" Miguel asked, his calm voice echoing as if from another time. And in that moment, unknowingly, Lívia took the first step toward a story that would change her life forever. Lívia couldn't hide her surprise upon seeing Miguel. There was something about him that intrigued her. A silent magnetism, as if he belonged to that place but also to somewhere far away. She slowly approached the counter, feeling the weight of Miguel's attentive gaze, which seemed to analyze her with both curiosity and familiarity. "I was just looking," she said awkwardly, picking up an old book from the nearest shelf. The faded cover indicated a romance forgotten by time, and Miguel, without hesitation, identified the title. "This is one of my favorites," he said with a slight smile. "It's not well known, but it tells a beautiful story about two strangers who meet under the most unlikely circumstances." Lívia returned his smile, feeling an instant connection. Their conversation flowed naturally, as if they had talked before. They spoke about books, the charm of the town, and the beauty of the place. Miguel surprised her with his detailed knowledge of the local history, narrating events as if he had witnessed them himself. At one point, Miguel looked out the window and noticed the sun setting. He pointed toward the horizon, where the last golden rays touched the calm waters of the sea. "Have you ever seen the sunset from here?" he asked, his eyes shining with restrained emotion. "There's a spot only a few people know. If you'd like, I can show you." Lívia hesitated for a second, but curiosity prevailed. Something inside her said that Miguel wasn't an ordinary person, and that invitation felt like more than just a suggestion. It was like a call to a unique moment. They walked together to a hidden spot, a small hill with a privileged view of the sea. The sun bid farewell slowly, painting the sky with orange and purple hues, and Lívia felt she was exactly where she needed to be. Beside Miguel, she began to realize that this encounter was the start of something deep and unexpected. The encounters between Lívia and Miguel became almost daily. Each morning, a new destination revealed itself. Rarely visited cobblestone streets, forgotten viewpoints, old cafes frozen in time. Miguel knew every corner as if he had explored them for decades. As they walked side by side, Lívia felt that he not only inhabited the town but was part of it in a way she didn't yet understand. Miguel was an enigma Lívia sought to unravel. He never used a phone, rarely talked about his life, and when he did, his stories were always about the past, narrated with such vivid detail they felt like memories. Once, as they passed through a square, Miguel pointed to an old bandstand. In the 80s, there was a band that played here every summer night. People danced until late, he said, with a nostalgia that made Lívia freeze for a moment. How did he know so much about a time he hadn't lived? A shiver ran through Lívia. Miguel spoke as if he had been there. It intrigued her and gave her the unsettling feeling that she was facing something unexplainable. Even so, the magnetism between them grew with every conversation, every shared silence. Miguel seemed to awaken in her a long-dormant feeling, a longing for something she couldn't define. One rainy afternoon, as they took shelter under the awning of an old building, Lívia dared to ask more about him. "You never tell me about your life. Who are you, really?" Miguel smiled, but his gaze shifted to the rain falling slowly over the town. It seemed like he was about to say something important but hesitated. He simply held Livia's hand and said, "I'm just someone trapped between what was and what can no longer be." The enigmatic response left Lívia even more confused but also more drawn to the mystery. Who was Miguel? Why did he seem so out of place in the present but so familiar with the past? Lívia knew something was profoundly wrong, but she also felt she was destined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Days passed like a dream, and Lívia felt that every moment with Miguel pulled her into a different reality, as if she were living a story outside of time. However, the mystery surrounding Miguel continued to haunt her, leaving her restless. It was as if a secret pulsed between the unspoken words and the glances he averted. One solitary afternoon, while Miguel was away, Lívia returned to the antique shop. The place was deserted, and the weak late afternoon light cast long shadows over the books and old objects. She wandered among the shelves, running her fingers over dusty covers and framed photographs that seemed forgotten by the world. That's when her eyes landed on something that made her heart race. On a high shelf, there was an album of old photos, seemingly abandoned. She pulled it down, and as she flipped through the pages, she found an image that took her breath away. Miguel, exactly as she knew him, was in a photo dated 1980. He stood beside a group of smiling young people at a summer party. Lívia studied the photo repeatedly, searching for any difference. Something that might show it was just a coincidence, perhaps an ancestor, someone similar. But it was impossible to deny. The face, the smile, the eyes, it was Miguel, and he hadn't changed at all. A mix of fear and fascination swept over her. How was this possible? Miguel seemed trapped in that moment, in a time that didn't align with who he was supposed to be. When Miguel returned to the antique shop, Lívia stood pale, holding the photo in her trembling hands. "Miguel, what is this?" she asked, her voice faltering. Miguel looked at the photo, and his expression darkened, a blend of sadness and resignation. There was no longer any way to avoid the truth. "I don't belong to this time, Lívia. I'm trapped between memories of a summer that never ended." The revelation made Livia's world crumble. Miguel wasn't just a mysterious young man. He was someone who had defied time and now lived trapped in an endless cycle, reliving a summer that would never end. Miguel's revelation left Lívia stunned. In the days that followed, she could barely concentrate on anything else. Her mind revolved around the idea of someone being trapped between the past and present, unable to move forward. Every memory of Miguel now carried a weight she couldn't bear, but at the same time, she felt an even deeper connection with him. She needed to understand and, above all, help him. Sitting at the edge of a cliff where they used to watch the sunset, Miguel told her how it all began. In 1980, during an unforgettable summer, Miguel had suffered a fatal accident while rushing to meet someone he loved. Since then, he had been trapped in that moment, reliving the same summer, unable to move on or find peace. "You're the first person who's been able to see me as I truly am," Miguel confessed, his voice laden with pain and longing. "All this time, I've been waiting for you." Lívia felt an uncontrollable urge to change that cruel fate. She knew Miguel didn't belong to this time, but the thought of losing him was unbearable. He wasn't just a shadow of the past. He was someone with whom she had built a real, intense connection, full of life. "We'll break this, Miguel." Lívia held his hands, determined. "We'll recreate the moment of the accident. Maybe that will break the cycle and set you free." Miguel hesitated. Lívia's proposal was risky and uncertain. He feared that if he could finally move on, he might disappear from her life forever. However, the pain of being trapped in an endless cycle seemed even greater. He knew this was his only chance, and perhaps the last time he could see the world through the eyes of someone who truly cared. With a final glance, filled with affection and sadness, Miguel agreed. They would plan it together, knowing that what they were about to do might end the love they had discovered, or become the beginning of something greater than they could ever imagine. The morning arrived shrouded in thick mist, as if time itself hesitated to move forward. Lívia and Miguel met on the deserted road leading to the accident site, a remote spot on the city's outskirts, where the summer of 1980 seemed never to have ended. The tension between them was palpable, every gesture laden with a mix of hope and fear of the unknown. Lívia tried to hide her apprehension, but her eyes couldn't conceal the whirlwind of emotions consuming her. She had spent sleepless nights trying to understand what she was about to do. If the plan worked, Miguel would finally be free. But what would happen next? What if he vanished forever? The thought was unbearable, but Lívia knew she had to take the risk. Miguel observed her silently, capturing every detail, as if he wanted to immortalize that moment. He was about to revisit the deepest pain of his existence. But this time he wasn't alone. Lívia held his hand, and he knew that, somehow, she would be his anchor, his last memory before the end. If something goes wrong, Lívia began, but Miguel interrupted her with a gentle finger on her lips. No matter what happens, our encounter changed everything. Miguel's eyes sparkled with certainty that, even if he disappeared, that summer, those memories, would live on in Lívia. They recreated the scene of the accident, every detail carefully planned. In the moment everything happened, Miguel let go of Lívia's hand, and his body dissolved into a faint glow, like a dream fading at dawn. Lívia reached for him, but he was no longer there. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Lívia felt an emptiness impossible to fill, but also an unexpected peace. Miguel had finally escaped the cycle that imprisoned him, leaving behind more than just memories. A love that transcended time and space. Days passed since Miguel's sacrifice, but for Lívia, time seemed to have stopped. She wandered through the town, searching for any sign, something to prove that he was still there somehow. The antique shop, now empty, was where she felt closest to him. Every object, every book, carried the memory of the summer they had shared. Then, as she rummaged through a pile of old papers, Lívia found a letter. The yellowed envelope bore her name, written in familiar handwriting. Trembling, she opened it and began to read. The letter was from Miguel, written in 1980, addressed to her long before their paths had ever crossed. Dear Lívia, from the moment I became trapped between what was and what could no longer be, I knew that someone special would help me find peace. That someone was you. Don't grieve our farewell. We were meant to meet. Your courage set me free, and now I can move forward. Right, live, and love. I'll always be with you, in the places only we know. Lívia finished reading with tears in her eyes, feeling Miguel's presence intensely and unexpectedly. He wasn't truly lost. His words, his story, and the love they had shared would live on forever in her memories. Months later, Lívia published a novel based on the story she had lived with Miguel. On the day of the book launch, the bookstore was packed, but one face stood out in the crowd. It was a young man with a familiar expression, smiling at her with the same look of someone who holds secrets from the past. Lívia blinked, and he disappeared among the shelves. She didn't need to chase after him to know. Miguel would always be there, somehow, in every line she wrote and every sunset she witnessed. Their love, after all, was eternal. Sunrise, what if love could transcend time? Don't let this encounter fade into the past. Take a step into this timeless romance and uncover the breathtaking ending of this emotional story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters and unique moments. Leave a like if you believe true love can overcome any barrier. Comment below. What would you do if you met someone trapped in time? Get ready to embark on a magical and mysterious experience. Hit play and dive into this unforgettable journey.